All right. It is March 21st at 8:03. I'm calling to order the special meeting of the Economic Development Commission. The agenda is as normal. We have one item on the agenda, which is to continue our discussion and hopefully make a decision about working with one of two or both marketing partners. We've had a lot of discussion about this, and I'd really like to hear from EDC members because we were deadlocked at the last meeting, and I think we have to, as a group, discuss, whether any of our views have changed, how they've changed, what points of view we have, so that the EDC members can make a decision. So as a result, when we go through the agenda, I'm going to call for citizen comments at the beginning, but I'm going to ask that the comments be made at the beginning so that we can then go into deliberations and have a discussion just among EDC members. And there may be times when we have questions for Jess and Charles, and obviously we can ask them and they can respond. So going through the agenda, are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? Okay, hearing none. Citizen comments. And so if you are in town hall, if you're online, just raise your hand. If you're in town hall, if you could come up to the table. And Charles, maybe you could call on, if you could, just in the order that people raise their hands. Are there any citizen comments? Because again, I would like to have the discussion following citizen comments be exclusively EDC unless we go off in some unexpected direction. So if you would make your comments now, that would be great. Beth?
John?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Beth.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see Jeffrey there. So Beth and then Jeffrey.
Okay, I just wanted to reiterate to the commission that after everything that we've been through and all of the wonderful interviews that both Charles and Jess have given to you folks, that the committee does believe that we should, at this point, go with class 4. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Beth. Jeffrey?
The only comment I really had, John, was if something came up as a member of the marketing committee and if I had a comment or something, if I could be allowed to say it. But I don't foresee that until I hear something that I would have something useful to say toward.
No, I understand. Let me just explain a more refined version of what I mean. What I want to make sure of, I'm not trying to shut down citizen comments. I want to make sure that the EDC members have the full time available to them to make the comments that they make. So I just don't want the citizen comments to crowd out the EDC comments. But if there's, I also need to. This meeting is scheduled for 1 hour, so those are the only factors. If we can fit in citizen comments within those constraints, but I will prioritize EDC comments if EDC members have them. So
yeah, sure, got it, John.
Thank you. Are there other non-EDC member comments? I don't see anyone online with their hand raised. All right. I should ask Jess and Charles, Jess first, if you just have any brief comments you want to make. You don't have to. We've talked to both of you a lot, but is there anything you want to say or add? And you'll have a chance to respond to questions and comments later.
I don't know if I have anything to add or say. I spoken to most people individually. I think that Charles and I have both kind of said that our proposals are a little bit apples to oranges because we offer different things. And I understand the decision either way.
Okay, thanks, Charles.
Echo what Jess said, certainly. We spent some time and we put together a proposal that, could have worked collaboratively. Ultimately, it doesn't sound like that is going to work out. So I'm looking forward to answering any questions and talking about the past performance of the current program and how that will be adapted to the future in any case.
Okay, thank you. We have 7 members. I think only Michael Green unless Michael is not in the room. He doesn't appear to be online. That just for people who are concerned about how we scheduled the meeting, if there were any, but how we scheduled the meeting and so forth, we need 5 votes to pass anything. It doesn't matter how many people are here. So this, Michael's, I forgot which way Michael voted, but it doesn't diminish, it doesn't allow for whoever he didn't vote for to win because he's not here. We still need 5 people to vote for it. So, does anyone, any EDC members want to share any insights that they gained between last meeting and this meeting? I will if no one raises their hand. I think I've learned a couple of things. Okay. I guess I've learned a few things. That has not changed my vote. So the first thing I've learned, maybe the first thing I've learned is to reinforce Jess's comment about apples and oranges. We are getting proposals for 2 different approaches that are designed to achieve very different things. The second is that I've done a fairly extensive analysis of the impact of Class 4's work. And for me, perhaps the most important outcome of this decision process is that for the objectives that we set now and in the future that are in support, direct support of the merchants of Woodstock, that we adopt a real world performance measure so that we know that our investment is helping the merchants. For me, it's all of the discussion about digital performance and all of the proposals, that we've had in the past and have now leave me with not a huge certainty that the money we're spending is that we're getting back more than we're spending. And I want to share, so I would like to share with you the analysis that I did. It's, I think, inconclusive. It's hopeful, but also concerning. But it is, I think, the way we should measure performance going forward. And so I'll share that with you in a minute. The third thing I concluded was that of the 3 objectives, I personally think that Jess's approach is doable and measurable for 2 of them, is preferable, I should say, for 2 of them. One of them is I believe that she could do a very good job, I should say. One is with the events objective, and one is with the attracting 25 qualified school choice candidates. Those, I think, would work with the organic approach that Jess is proposing. I think that the approach, that the 3rd objective, which is to increase, and I'm going to say it this way from now on, whenever we talk about tourists coming to Woodstock, I'm going to always talk about increasing merchant retail sales, which is the purpose of tourists coming to Woodstock. So our 3rd objective of increasing merchant retail sales during downtimes, I'm convinced that Class 4's approach is a much better approach to achieve that. And that, I think maybe some of you have intuitively reached a similar conclusion, which is why having the 2 of them work together was appealing to us, but that's not currently possible. So, I'm not trying to cast aspersions. I understand why it's very difficult. So, for me, the most important debate that we're having, and that I would like to not have again, is whether or not the marketing works or the communications works. In my organization, when we found that certain types of marketing worked, I told them that they had an unlimited budget, because in that budget we were investing 1 and we were getting back like 6. And I said, please spend as much money as you possibly can. If they were investing 1 and getting 0.9 or 1.2, I would shut the program down. I wouldn't pick it in the middle. So what I've concluded is that is that the most important thing for us as an EDC to get clear about whether marketing achieves the objectives we're trying to achieve. And I think we have a structure now where the 3 objectives we set are going to be measurable, as long as we agree on the measuring of the third thing. Figuring out whether we fix the events calendar, it's a qualitative assessment, but we're reasonable people. We can look at it, we can say we made a lot of progress or we didn't. Attracting 25 qualified school leads, relatively easy to assess. I mean, what is a qualified school lead? We can debate that, but that's, I think, a minor point we can make in conclusion. Whether or not we've increased retail sales, I would love to have a better approach than the one I'm just suggesting to you, but the one I'm suggesting to you is better than making the assumption that because we have lots of clicks, which we had, that we're going to get additional retail sales, which we didn't have. So let me just share that with you. And to me, the most important thing that comes out of this, whether it comes out of it today or later, and I'll talk about that last thing. Let me just share my screen. Did I push the record button? Yeah, okay. Sorry, let me just show you. So this looks at the campaign performance during the, quote, flood campaign. We had a very discrete period of time, which was July and August-ish, when everyone was saying, we have to get people to come back to Woodstock and spend money. And Class 4, to their credit, responded immediately and without regard to how much we were paying them, and conducted an aggressive campaign. And this is what happened. If you look at these years, this shows the growth in our total retail revenue, all retailers that pay sales tax, not just EDC tax, all retailers in Woodstock. And it's compared to all of the other towns in Vermont that had data for the same period. So in other words, there are 90 or 100 towns that reported data for every year here. In 2015, something was weird with the data, and it was way off. It's something, they changed the way they were measuring something. This shows how Woodstock performed in terms of its growth in August, September, and October of every year, including 2023. In 2023, our August, September, and October retail revenues were down 0.9% from the August, September, and October the year before. That's the little red bar on the right. So that's what happened in August, September, and October. So you might say, well, that's terrible. Class 4 did this work, and our revenues went down by 1%. Well, it turns out that our typical pattern is to go down by 1.5%, is to be 1.5% worse than the state. Over the last 10 years, Woodstock's retail revenues have grown a little bit slower than the state's. It's volatile. Some years were up, some years were down. That's the blue bars. But on average, the state is down 1.5%. We were down over minus 0.9%. This is not a great way to measure the actual impact of marketing. It's the only way I know, and I would immediately agree to anyone who can propose a better way. I would also be willing to test hypotheses that people have about why this data might be biased. What I won't accept is our hypotheses that are considered as facts. I've not seen a single piece of data that suggests that this analysis is wrong, although I readily admit that it could be biased for a whole variety of reasons. It takes an incredible amount of time to put this together. I'm not exaggerating, I probably spent 12 or 15 hours getting this data from the state over the last 36 hours. So at some point, the analysis becomes not worth it, but it's worth it now, and we could do more of it. That's what happened during the flood campaign. Let me show you what happened during the first 12 months of Class 4's campaign, which is July 22 to June 23, just the first 12 months, just pre, it doesn't overlap with the flood. Here, during those 12 months, our retail revenues went up by 0.1%. Typically, over the last 5 years, just through 2016, we were beating the state by 3%. So there we underperformed. These are 2 data points. I would not, there's 2 data points that it's not enough to conclude really anything yet. But I think we need to continue to measure. Anytime we set an objective, I think we need to continue to measure how we're doing against this measure or something else.
John, may I ask a question or make a comment?
Yeah,
just on the data. More common, this is my second time looking at this. I got your email in the middle of the night. So I took a look at this a few hours ago. I think it would be incorrect to say that we went up or down by 0.2, by 1%, or by negative 0.2 or 1%. That would be an incorrect statement. Up or down in regard to the rest of the state, not in respect to the previous revenue in Woodstock. In other words, when we say we went up,
Yeah.
1%, we're not saying we went up one. We might have gone up 50%.
No, you're absolutely sorry. I totally apologize. Geez, it's a huge mistake. I'm absolutely totally agree. What Charles is saying is exactly right. During this period, during this period, the number I remember in my head was we went up by 5.3%, I think. So we grew quite healthily. The state went up, the rest of the state went up by 5.2%. So this represents the 1% improvement that we had over the state in that period. And these represent the improvement or the falling behind of the state. These are not our growth rates. This is the difference between our growth rate. It's retail revenue growth versus the rest of Vermont. Thank you, Charles. That's a really important point. So that is very important. So does everyone understand that this, I think, is the best measure that I can develop now, that we can develop now. With more work, there may be better measures. I don't know. Certainly, by the way, another way to do this, and the way I think that Charles does this with many of his other clients and Jess does with the inn, is to have an attribution campaign where if you buy something, you have to give a code. And we know that code only came from class 4, it only came from Jess. And that's how in other product lines we do it. If we could do that here, that would be great. The last thing I learned, and then I'll be quiet, has to do with the timing. I don't know whether or not we are going to change our mind or not. I think that doing nothing, we don't have a contract now, that doing nothing may be an option, but it should be an option we pick on purpose, not because we can't decide to do something, although that's a hope, not a requirement. So what I tried to look at, and I think what is causing us in a big sense of urgency is one of our 3 objectives, which is to try to increase retail sales in Woodstock in the months of May and June. Both Jess and Charles, I think, have said that we're not too late, but they also said we don't have more than a few days to, or at least Charles has said that. I don't know, I presume Jess, similarly needs us to move fairly quickly. And so if we can't resolve this today, and I'm not advocating this, I'd like to resolve it today. But if we can't, I felt it was sort of my obligation as the chair to at least give some advanced thought to what could we do. And so what I looked at was how much worse would it be if instead of trying to optimize for May and June, we optimize for June and July. Now, maybe having another month is just going to be an enormous waste of time. And I'm not advocating for this. So after this comment and other EDC member comments, we can take a quick vote and see where we stand. But this shows the percentage of visitors that come to the Welcome Center. This adds up to 100%. And you can see that May and June are good months to focus on. Better months would have been March and April maybe, but these are good months. I mean, given the timing, this is the only thing that people could have proposed in their proposals. But it also looks at the average retail spending per visitor. Now, this is just an index. Since many more people are coming to town than go into the Welcome Center. This is just a relative index. And if whatever people in January spent was 100, June and July are quite low in terms of average spending. Not as bad as October, when people, as we know, come here and just look around, crowd the sidewalks. But they're pretty low. And so a campaign to increase traffic during June and July might not increase the traffic by, it might create a little bit more crowding in July as July gets up to the level in August. But we're nowhere near the kind of peak crowding levels that we see in October or even in September. And so we might have another month to decide on what we want to do without jeopardizing, but not more than a month, without jeopardizing the likely value of a campaign. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I just have a question in general. Maybe I could ask after about this data, about that second chart,
This chart about the population thing?
the spend chart on the right. It's no longer visible, John.
Yeah, sorry, I'll put it back, but you know, you do you want me to put it back up? I'll put it back.
I can remember it. I think this can be quick. So what that's retail business in the downtown economic district in Woodstock. No F&B, no what. So what is
it's
on
all
the chart on the right? Yeah.
It's all retail. Well, it's sales and use tax. So I don't know. Perhaps it needs to be added to the F&B. I was told that I don't know exactly. I'm pretty sure that the pattern, if we add, I don't know if it includes. It's not the downtown district. It's Woodstock, Vermont, the legal entity. I mean the.
And the only reason I ask is this. And again, this is entirely a hypothesis, but as someone who has just lived here for roughly 30 years, and this graph follows almost an inverse parabola. For example, November, which has the largest shopping event of the year, underperforming April, when significant numbers of shops are closed 2 or 3 days a week, and there's no one on the sidewalk. So again, this could be entirely accurate, but in my mind, I would be concerned because again, that's certainly not the picture that we see, you know, during that time frame of March and April. As someone who's quite familiar with the downtown business district, so I'm just not sure.
As you and I have talked about, the hypothesis that you have. Well, first of all, I don't know. I took this to be all retail sales, but I think it's sales and use tax. So that's we probably need to add into that meals and room tax. We're not going to do that before 9 o'clock. But that may be an incompletion. I believe the meals and rooms tax spending. I believe I've looked at it. I mean, I know I've looked at it. I believe the pattern is similar. It may not be identical, and it may be enough to change it. The analysis that you just described, I'd be happy to, you know, as we go forward, I'm all in on doing the kind of analysis you described, which can be done with state data. I would sort of.
It's not a bad idea. Like this almost just strikes me as one of those cases where we kind of wonder, you know, why Arlington, Virginia is such a traffic source in Woodstock, Vermont, and why so much of our traffic comes from there's a data center. A graph like that almost makes me wonder if, you know, the propane company is, you know, selling off their credit for next year doing that or something like that, because then it just doesn't make any sense. Again, that's just a hypothesis, and I don't think I think it's irrelevant to the discussion about marketing.
Right.
I just wanted to point that out as someone who lives here, and
I think that's exactly the kind of analysis that I think we could do, because I think we can answer that question with some time spent with the state to understand that. So that's what I've learned.
John, one thing about what that graph just showed, I've just got to say, it seems like the average spend that you're talking about, which you show as being lower in July than in previous months before, it's based on the people visiting the Welcome Center.
Yeah,
but that's the metric you're using, and I would say it's false, based on so many years of John. Okay, call it a hypothesis, but I know, speaking to so many other business owners in Woodstock, retail business owners, as well as my own experience, that my per average sale in July is way higher than the months that preceded, and it's the case for other stores too. So I'm just questioning the correlation between people visiting the visitor center and you coming out with that idea that the per average sale is lower.
No, it's not the average sale in the store. It's the average sale of the number of people coming. So if 100 people come to the Welcome Center and 2 people come into your store, those 2 people may spend a lot, but the average across the 100 is low. I'm not saying that that's what's happening. However, I have data from one retailer, 12 months in 2023, and we track their revenues versus the number of people who come into the Welcome Center. And it matches, I would say it's within 3% every single month, with the exception of 2 months. It's October, November, or September and October, where the obvious happens, where the number of visitors spikes and the total revenue of the store doesn't. That doesn't prove that it's true for the other 199, I think, businesses that are collecting sales and use tax in Woodstock. But
I mean, John, I think at the end of the day, it just highlights that we need to do the best we can to find ways to collect and aggregate this data. And I think you said earlier that you don't assume this is correct. This is just all you have. So, Jeffrey, I think you could be right. John could be right. It's something probably different anyway, but it really doesn't affect the outcome of this conversation, except for the point being that, you know, we need to have trackable metrics moving forward for these sorts of projects, in my opinion.
Right. Well, one other point, there are 2 points to it. One is that I agree completely, but the last chart I did specifically because if we end up in a deadlock, what happens if we were to move the months that we want to work on from May and June to June and July? And I think the answer is it still is a decent period for us to try to support the merchants by increasing sales and use tax and food and beverage, meals and room tax, because those months are not peak months. We don't have to worry too much about creating havoc on the sidewalks because there's so many people. And it looks like there's upside potential to attract more people. That's the only reason for doing it, and the point that you made. Okay, are there other comments by EDC members? I don't want to, the data is not, yeah, Deborah?
I just have a question that I need to understand. Like an overall plan for marketing and keeping up with events and keeping up with social and things for the town. They need to work hand in hand. They are part of the same thing in a sense. However, does the town, what is the town's responsibility to have a marketing plan, or does their marketing all need to come out of EDC, because EDC is supposed to be working towards the economic, but we need the whole thing, and they are connected. So I'm just wondering, what's the marketing budget for Woodstock to the town?
Yeah, so I have so as a member of the finance committee, I can answer that second question, which I think is essentially zero. We probably pay a couple $100 a year for a website. But importantly, Eric Duffy has asked about to have a discussion about having a if we were to at some point earlier, we were talking about a kind of a Jennifer Schmidtke type arrangement where the EDC hired a part-time person. And Eric asked, would we talk to him about combining that with a position in town hall, having the person actually work in town hall. And I would describe what I understood he was looking for to be more operational things, keeping the website up to date, making sure that announcements were posted and things of that sort. But so that's the only information I have. Currently, they don't have a person to do that. I mean, the staff kind of does it. I wouldn't describe anything they do as marketing, and I think it's a good question. So that's kind of on. I told him once we get through with this, we will discuss this with him, and we're open to that.
Okay, because I think that's key, and it's not just, to me, it's not just operational. It feels out of whack that the town has no marketing budget at all. It feels like we should be supplementing for the purpose of economic development, not that it lands solely on the EDC. But I don't know how other people feel about it. It just feels false.
Well, there's certainly
not false like it doesn't exist, false like it doesn't feel right. Yeah, I believe everything you're saying. I just feel like there should be more available to us for the entire thing, is what I'm feeling, not just us.
All right. Other comments? Who's online? No one is on. Is Michael? No, Michael's not online. So everyone
I did have a comment. Sorry, I was raising my hand. I'm not sure if it could be seen, but the good thing about that is there is kind of a model that we can look at with other small towns and small cities and how they manage these two objectives. You know, in my experience in research, as we got into this account roughly 3 years ago now, those sort of fit into two buckets. And by the way, that experience is mirrored in the commerce space as well. The first of those buckets is an operational task. And that typically includes the social components, the event management, and in large part the services which Jess has proposed and which the town of Woodstock does need, which the town of Woodstock did have at a certain point in time in history when Class 4 and was brought on, and we additionally had that role. The second are initiatives. And so, I'm not sure how many of you read the document, the recap from my meeting with John and Joe. But essentially, the way you'd handle this, like look at Stowe, for example. I use that as an example. Montreal's another example. There's someone who is sort of an evergreen role, and the sphere of that role encompasses organic social media, blogs, and events management, coordinating those messages with the local community, the audience you already have, the audience that's already engaged. Typically, though, when you're looking at tourism or marketing initiatives, you work with a firm that is specialized in those use cases, and they're hired for those specific objectives. And neither one is more or less important. They're actually both two sides of a coin, but they're typically, again, used for different purposes, and they use different tools which are specifically suited to those purposes. And so part of this, I think, again, we can kind of look at the roadmap that other comparable locations have set forward, and kind of take a page from their book, because there is a model for this. There is a best practice way to do this.
Other comment, Larry?
Yeah, a bunch of questions. I hope everybody's read Greta's very lengthy and excellent summary of the meeting with Charles, and I highly recommend that, because I think it puts our decision, or the issues for our decision in very clear, and it's not been clear to me at all. I have to. I am primarily concerned with the cost of the marketing, and the fact that we have very limited funds, and that we have potentially before us a number of possible needs for expenditure to really enhance the experience of the people who come here. So the emphasis in my mind is to make the experience better, and to make our social media presence better. And I see the need for the digital marketing. I see the need for targeting, etc. I don't see in what I read that even the budget that we have proposed, or the Class 4 proposes, that we're going to get the full digital marketing that I think it's called Clavio can give us with the funds that we would be allocating to them, so that we would have a somewhat foreshortened, and Charles can clarify that if I'm wrong, utilization of what we're paying for. But I also don't think we want to throw away this platform. I see that as a really great resource. Just it's for this year, and to be sensitive to what the community is asking us to do or not to do. I feel like we should go much more heavily in the social media area. Let Jessica do what obviously everybody agrees that she can do so well, and see if Charles would be willing to keep the Clavio platform viable for a year while we assess the results of that. And then we can keep some money. Two things: we can keep some money, hopefully, to do some things in town that will enhance the visitor experience, which will have a direct effect, I believe, on the merchants. These are what we really want, or I would think if I were a merchant, I'd really want is for people to come here and stay here and have a really great experience, and then they'll spend their money rather than coming through, not finding a place to eat, or a place to go to the bathroom, or not knowing where things are, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that will enhance sales. I don't know anything. specific about that, as much, if not more, than going out and trying to find more and more people to send emails to. So
I can
primarily,
certainly
I
answer your
guess,
first question. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
primarily, I guess I'm concerned that if we agree to an $80,000 marketing budget, that we won't have any money left to do other things, and it won't feel responsive to what the community's asked us to do.
Charles, if you want to make a quick comment, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, I can comment as to the Klaviyo. So there are three pieces, buckets of this. We call them parts of the funnel, but basically the place where the place where we capture or we target a new audience to bring here. The second piece is the website. We think of that as the middle of the funnel, and the bottom is Klaviyo. So that is just one piece. But in the proposal that we provided in response to RFP, there's no single one element of any one of those platforms has been reduced. So I'd be happy to here we're kind of getting that information, but that is not accurate. We would be there would be no reduction. Klaviyo doesn't work that way. We basically pay for volume and within the how much we can use the platform, and there's a few tiers. But we're not in a scenario where we're like going to extend over a specific tier or something like that. So there would be no reduction to that platform whatsoever.
I understood that, but you're not doing the segmentation that you did 2 years ago. Is that not correct?
No. So after the segmentation is absolutely still taking place. That has been a misunderstood point on a number of cases, and we're happy to open up the Klaviyo account, and any independent auditor could confirm this for you. The segmentation is taking place at the top of the funnel, and by the way, nothing has really changed there, and we're still using the data there. When we're capturing the prospects on the website, there used to be a number of different automated flows that prospect would receive. I incorrectly, and I was corrected by someone on my team, stated that had been reduced to 1 flow from 4. That is incorrect. What has actually happened is that there are 4 flows, and 2 of those flows, the 2 worst performing flows, where basically we weren't seeing results, were combined with the 2 highest performing flows. So it's no longer food and shopping, arts and travel, et cetera. I actually believe those 2 were combined into 1 specific segment. So it's a smaller segmentation, but there is data to show us it wasn't just done willy-nilly. Now, all of the initial segments, they're still there. They still exist. It's quite literally a button to turn them on and off. The reason why that was reduced is because every single season, to ensure this experience is relevant to those visitors, because remember, we're basically pre-building a flow ahead of time. Every single season, we're changing the creative in those flows so that we're not sending messages to a new prospect who's interested or engaged at some level with Woodstock, and they see, in the middle of winter, come visit Woodstock, and we're looking at like a summer field. Right? So we want to make sure that all the content and collateral in those messages is specific to the season and specific to what's happening in Woodstock. And so what we basically did within that specific part of the program is by eliminating 4 flows and turning it into 2 flows, we basically cut the workload in half, the overhead in half, in updating just that specific part of the program. And that was a collaborative discussion with the marketing committee. So it was not a unilateral, one-way conversation. We looked at a number of areas to cut, and we basically determined that cutting that specific outcome would have more or less a net zero impact, because we had 2 segments which were underperforming from the very beginning. And I mean, that's marketing, right? We have hypotheses. We think this is the audience. We test it. We learn from the data what actually works, and we kind of kill what doesn't work. In this case, what that did is it opened budget for us to take on what was left over from Jen Schmidtke's role when she resigned, when she had a child and left the position. And that all happened very quickly at the last minute, as we know. So we did our best to kind of pick up and keep things moving as best we could. And that was actually the primary area that was removed from the program.
All right.
That's really helpful to me. I wanted to, John, if it's all right, I'm really impressed with Charles and his flexibility. I've read all the information, and I know that they're doing a superb job. I don't mean anything I'm saying to be critical of that. In fact, quite the opposite. I'm quite impressed with what they do. That notwithstanding, I still feel like that we're spending too much money. I want to make one other thing I would like very much, regardless of how we go out, how we end up here. I think we need to address the website, and I think we need to allocate some funds to investigate changing it.
Greta, Greta, and then Roger quickly, but go ahead, Greta. And then after Roger, I'm going to ask for a vote to see where we are. Greta?
I just wanted to speak to what Larry and Charles were just discussing. So I think that, and correct me if I'm wrong, so the class 4 is still has all the levels of the funnel to gather all the information, but I guess what we were discussing and what how it was described in the summary of the meeting the other night is basically that you're gathering all that information, you're not taking out that type of segmenting, but as far as the emails that are received, it is in year 1 versus year 2. Year 1, the user list was receiving different emails based on their interests. And in year 2, everyone was receiving the same email. Is that correct?
That is not correct. We combined the segments into one. So there were 4 segments. 2 of those groups were combined into one. So now basically just there's a total of, there's 8 different excuse me, I'll just, what would that be? So, sorry, there would be 8 different individual experiences depending on the season and depending on your interest group versus like 32.
Okay, but given, being on the marketing committee and looking at the emails that go out, I haven't seen 8 different emails going out per month. I'm just curious what exactly,
So there are 2 buckets of emails. There are thousands of emails going out a month. So the one bucket of email are the organic emails that we're sending, this, the same as you have in Jess's proposal. Those organic emails have the ability to be targeted. We could essentially say, okay, send this message to a specific audience. We typically do not. Most of those messages go to the wide audience, which is really everyone. And those are the organic monthly emails that we send out. There's a second type of email that's happening, and that's the program that sort of sits below this. Those emails happen automatically on a preset cadence, and those are changed every season. So those emails are segmented. And the segmentation, instead of being 4 ways, is now simply 2 ways. Two segments were combined into one. However, the organic messages that we're sending go to the wide audience. Everyone on the list gets the invitation to Wassel. They go through the Wassel flow. Mm-hmm. However, if you were to sign up during November for the email list, you would get specific messages as to your interests. Well, there would be 2 different flows. And the creative would also match winter content that was captured. Does that, so there's an organic program and there's an email automation program. And one is tied in with specific actionable goals, whereas the organic program is really designed to just communicate and make our audience aware of what's happening and what's going on in Woodstock. So that's the difference between the 2. Is that helpful?
Yes.
Okay, Roger, I apologize. I need to we're running short of time, and we need a couple of minutes at the end in case we don't agree. So I'm going to jump over you, Roger. I apologize to Marion, and then I'll give Jess a chance also and then I'll come back to you, Roger, if we have time. Please make your comments as brief as you can, or questions.
Yeah, I guess I was 2 things. One is I was engaging in this conversation about how we're segmenting the email currently. And I do know on the marketing committee, every month we review 4 emails, and I assume, and as I recall, some of those are going into the sort of the what you're calling the non-organic campaign, and some are going to the organic monthly send to all. I think we're looking at 4. They're quite similar.
You're only looking at the organic emails monthly. The other messages are pre-built. What's being changed in those messages those are like preset flows, is the creative.
Yeah.
And we basically do a flow overhaul. So every month you look at a set of emails and those are organic and approve
Right.
those. Every quarter, we update the flows, and those quarterly, that's just basically designed for season. So there's a flow overhaul every quarter. That is to make sure it's like relevant to what's going on and relevant to the creative of the season and all of that.
And I assume, but that flow is like based more on when the person entered the system, and then they get a certain like series of emails based on.
Exactly.
Okay.
It's based on a few other factors as well. Exactly. And then there's sort of a break point at a quarterly level aligned with the seasonal shift where that changes. The cadence is small enough where it doesn't overlap into another season substantially. So it's fairly tight. And then there's additional, like, for example, Wassel, micro flow being set up for Wassel, because that again is one of our signature events during that period of time. At the end of last year, we tested our event promotion framework that we set up, which is really a system to market local events and to leverage this 40,000 person list and this entire program for local events so that they can use it. And that was something that was was an objective of last year. It wasn't an outcome objective like a revenue objective, but it wasn't an objective identified by the marketing group. And that was completed. And so we haven't really had an opportunity to test that. But that's another way that these sort of flows could be introduced and further integrated into like the Wassel flow, for example.
Got it.
But
Okay.
again,
So,
the 4 emails you look at are organic emails, not flow emails.
thank you for clarifying that. I guess my one comment would be, I think we all agree that it's, kind of echoing what Larry said. I think we all know that the website needs to be updated. And to me, like, this is not a question of whether or not Class 4 has done an excellent job and not only been extremely flexible, but also like incredibly effective. It's just a question of like, how much money do we want to spend and how do we want to prioritize that spend? And I think, also the point that was made in the summary of sort of how the cost of Class 4 is kind of misrepresented because the ad spend and some of the expenses are rolled into that budget is important to keep in mind. So I want to make sure that financially speaking, we're comparing apples to apples, right? I want to make sure that I understand what is the total cost for Jess's program versus the Class 4 program. And I want to make sure that all the sort of overhead expenses are being accounted for in the same way. Because really, to me, a big part of this decision is about making sure that there's enough money, as Larry said, available to address the concerns of the community about, the impact of tourism and to update the website, which is probably going to be more complicated than we think, but really, really important.
Okay, Jess, and then if we have we're not going to have time for Jess. Go ahead. This will be the last comment.
I'm going to make this super quick, but I just wanted to clarify that the proposal that I put forward, I can also target people and do automatic email responses with the program that I've included. So if somebody comes to the website and signs up for the email, we have a list of preferences. They could check that off. There would be auto responses depending on what they've checked off. And then there could be any sort of like combination of automatic emails that could go out to any sort of segment or group. The difference is that I didn't propose doing paid ad spend. So it would just be someone coming to the website, not like clicking on an ad on Facebook to come to the website to sign up for an email. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, thank you. All right, I think I'd just like to take a show of a vote, not a formal vote with a motion. I just want to see where we are in terms of if we had a motion to award the contract to Jess, or if we had a motion to award the contract to Class 4. I'm just going to go around quickly. Todd?
Class 4.
Larry?
Jess.
Greta?
Jess.
Deborah?
Class 4.
Marion?
Jess.
Me, am I the only one left? Me, class 4. Is there any, I thought it was Joe was on the camera next to Charles, but that might have been Jeffrey. Anyway, Joe, are you here?
Joe and Mike Green are not here.
Okay, so that's 6. Okay. All right. We're at 3-3. I think we're having very good discussions. I think we're still learning, which is a little disconcerting, but necessary. I'd much rather be still learning than not learning and not knowing. We need to, I think, understand what it would take to safeguard our data from disappearing. And so, Greta, I'd like to have a discussion I'd like you to have a discussion with Charles to understand how there are license fees that, we are not going to ask class 4 to expend a penny more on our behalf because we can't come to a decision. They have gone above and beyond. So we need to understand what the minimal cost would be of keeping that data in abeyance so that we don't lose it. And I will get back to you all now. I think that we should keep up a cadence of meetings as frequently as we can stand. But I also think we should design activities in between the meetings, as we did this past week, to make sure that we accelerate and deepen our knowledge and analyze issues that people have raised and so forth, rather than just continuing to vote. I think that we learned a lot in the past week. That didn't change anyone's vote, but we learned a lot. I'd like to continue that learning process. And I just don't have the time to propose it precisely now, but today is Thursday. By Saturday, I will get back to I'll reach out to each of you and we'll figure out a process. We'll try to identify another meeting time. I will say that between Jess and Charles, they have devoted a ton of time. We need to find a way to make the interactions with them as efficient as possible so that they're not spending all of their time proposing to us. I just want to be sensitive to that as well. I think that's where we are. I want to thank everybody who's on this call for making the effort and for sharing the information. And I think we will continue to try to move forward. I am hopeful that we won't have to give up on our specific objective of trying to increase retail sales for merchants, because I do think that having that effort focus on June and July rather than May and June is probably not quite as optimal, but it's still, I think, a valid objective for the EDC to have. And hopefully we will be, and I think we will be able to, if we make a decision soon, we will be able to pursue that. I think May and June is off the table now, but I think June and July should still be on the table. So,
John,
okay.
will you send out the those 2 analyses that you did, and
yes,
and also tell us what you see from them, what conclusions you made?
Well,
maybe other people have seen it. I hadn't seen those before.
They didn't exist until, I don't know, 11:45 p.m. last night.
8 hours ago, yeah.
Okay, well, if you would send them out and also just summarize what you conclude from them, please.
I think they are on the website, so I will do that. I may enhance them. There's a question that was raised about food and beverage being included or not. And so I may take a little bit of time to update it to include it if I find that it's not included. But I will do that over the next few days. If it may be on the website, if it is, exactly what I posted is on the website. I think I put it there, but I was, falling asleep. So,
John, may I ask a question? And I recognize the time. If it's not possible, I understand. I think I'd be curious, and I imagine Jess would be as well. We're talking about a $20,000 delta between these 2 programs. Is that the primary factor that's like, what are the concerns? Like, what basically makes up that difference? Is that the primary concern, just the dollars? Is that where we're hung up?
Charles, can I just make a suggestion? It's 8:57. I have a hard stop. It's a great question. Can I propose? I will include that, or actually, Charles, if you would like to just send an email to the group, just please don't reply all, everybody, because then we get an open meeting issue. If you would just send that email to the group, then I think you'll get an answer to that question, and we'll keep that question on the agenda. I understand the reason for it. It's just I just like to end with it. I want the next steps to be clear. I don't think we're going to come to a decision. It's 8:58. So I just want the next steps to be as what I just described, because I don't think we have any other choice. Actually, if you guys want to stay on, I think when I sign off, you may, no, I think then the recording disappears. So
I'll send the email, John. Yeah.
yeah, if you do that, I don't want to shut off discussion at all, but I just want to proceed, you know.
I think it would just be just helpful to know.
Yeah, no, I think it's a
and
very
for
good question.
Context, but
It's an excellent question. And Roger, we'll find a way to incorporate your comment if you're still on. I apologize for cutting you off. Thank you for your patience. All right, thanks, everybody.
Motion to adjourn.
Yes, is there a second? Yes, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, all right, thanks, everybody.
Thanks.